The hospital walls hummed with the low rhythm of machines, steady, patient, uncaring. I'd just started to believe I was healing when Brian walked in. My eldest son, the one who always carried himself like his father. Only this time, he wore that uneasy half-smile I'd learned to fear, the kind that came before bad news. He stood at the edge of the bed, fingers gripping the handle of his backpack like a guilty child caught in the act. I noticed the way his eyes darted toward the doorway, and I didn't even need him to speak to know something was wrong. "Mom," he started, his voice trembling. We sold the house." The world went quiet. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misheard him. Maybe the medication was playing tricks on me. But his tone was too real, too fragile. He looked like a man drowning in his own confession. My hands shook as I tried to sit up. "You what?" He didn't answer. He just looked down, and then I saw Daniel in the doorway. My youngest. The one who promised after his father's funeral, "I'll take care of you, Mom. Always." Now he couldn't even meet my eyes. The room felt smaller, colder. I could smell the antiseptic, the echo of betrayal already thick in the air. Brian took a deep breath. It was the only way to cover the medical bills. "You were dying. We didn't have a choice." "We." That word cut deeper than the news itself. I asked for the papers, my voice barely steady. He hesitated, then pulled a folded document from his bag. My heart raced as I scanned the signatures. Both their names. Both my sons. The house gone. No warning. No discussion. Just gone. For a moment, I couldn't even cry. My mind flashed back to the night we bought that house, me and their father, painting the walls ourselves, laughing about the future. That house wasn't a property. It was a promise, a memory, a legacy, and they'd sold it like it meant nothing. I stared at them, both avoiding my gaze, and something inside me shifted. A quiet storm, the kind that doesn't scream, but waits. "Who's we?" I asked, voice low. Brian glanced toward Daniel. Daniel swallowed hard and said, "It was Brian's idea, but we both agreed." That was the moment the doctor walked in, cheerful and oblivious, asking how I was feeling. I smiled. I even said better. Because the truth was, I wasn't broken yet. But something new was born in that silence. Not anger, not pain, something colder, smarter. Revenge doesn't come from rage. It comes from quiet moments like that, when you realize trust has been buried beside love. And while they thought they'd taken everything, they had no idea what I still had left. As they left the room, I glanced at the paperwork one last time and noticed something strange about the buyer's signature. A name I'd seen before, somewhere I should never have. If you've ever trusted someone who made you regret it, subscribe. You'll understand what came next. Coming home felt wrong. The first thing that hit me wasn't the smell of the lemon cleaner I used to love. It was silence. A kind of hollow quiet that made every step echo with something missing. The curtains were gone. The living room felt stripped bare. And yet the keys still fit. If my sons had really sold the house, why did I still have access? Why hadn't the new owner changed the locks? I walked through each room slowly, running my fingers across the empty shelves and the faint outlines where family photos used to hang. Every corner whispered memories I wasn't ready to remember. Birthdays, anniversaries, the sound of my husband's laughter. But what hurt most wasn't what was gone. It was what they didn't bother to hide. On the kitchen counter lay a crumpled receipt from a notary office, dated just 3 days before Brian's visit. I unfolded it carefully, my eyes tracing every detail until one line stopped me cold. Name of buyer's representative, C. Whitmore. Whitmore. That name hit like a ghost from the past. My late husband's brother, Charles Whitmore, had used that name for business years ago. He despised me from the moment I married into the family, convinced I'd stolen his brother's inheritance. But he was supposed to be living out of state, or so I thought. I sat down slowly, the paper trembling in my hands. My sons didn't have the brains to forge legal papers on their own. They could barely file taxes without help. Someone had guided them. And if Charles was involved, It meant this betrayal ran deeper than desperation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dim glow of the living room lamp, listening to the tick of the old grandfather clock my husband built. Every sound seemed louder, sharper, like the house itself was trying to speak. That's when I noticed it. A thin folder half-tucked under the couch. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were photocopies of bank transfers. Large amounts sent from an account under Brian's name to another listed as CW Holdings. CW. Charles Whitmore. My heart pounded. The buyer wasn't a stranger. He was family. And my sons hadn't sold the house out of love. They'd sold it out of fear, or worse, greed. I picked up the phone to call Brian, but stopped midway. What would I say? I know you lied. No. I needed proof, undeniable proof. Revenge without evidence is just noise. So I decided to wait. Watch. Collect every missing piece until I could bury them all with the truth. Before going to bed, I stood by the window, looking out at the yard my husband once planted roses in. Only one bush still survived, thorns everywhere, but still alive. I smiled faintly. They thought they'd buried me under lies, but I was still standing. And tomorrow I'd start digging. The next morning, I received a letter. No return address, no sender's name. Inside was a single line written in blue ink. You don't know what they signed. If you've ever felt something wasn't right, even when everyone swore it was, subscribe. You'll want to see what happens when the truth finally surfaces. The letter sat on my kitchen table all morning. Just a single sentence written in a hand I didn't recognize. You don't know what they signed. I read it over and over until the words felt carved into me. Whoever sent it knew something. Something my sons didn't tell me. By noon I couldn't sit still. My body still ached from the surgery, but the ache inside me was worse. So I called Brian. He didn't pick up. Then Daniel. Straight to voicemail. That told me everything I needed to know. By late afternoon, I drove to Brian's apartment. The place was smaller than I remembered. Empty beer bottles on the counter, blinds half shut. When he opened the door, his face froze like a child caught sneaking out at night. Mom, he said, voice low, you shouldn't be driving yet. I didn't bother answering. I just walked past him into the living room. We need to talk. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. If this is about the house, it's exactly about the house. I pulled the folded notary receipt from my bag and placed it on the table. His eyes widened, just slightly, but enough. Brian, who is C. Whitmore? He hesitated. Too long. Was it Uncle Charles? I asked. Tell me the truth. He looked at the floor. He said he could help. Said he'd handle everything with the lawyers and the buyer. We just had to sign some papers. My voice cracked. You didn't even read them, did you? He swallowed hard. He said it was for the sale, Mom. For your treatment. He promised it was legal. My chest tightened. All this time, I thought they'd betrayed me out of greed. But looking at him now, trembling, ashamed, I saw fear. Manipulation. Where's Daniel? I asked. At work. Call him. Now. An hour later, Daniel showed up. Nervous, pale, hands in his jacket pockets. He couldn't look at me either. When I asked him about the papers, he admitted it. They never saw the full contract. Uncle Charles had met them in a cafe, saying he'd finalize everything with his lawyer friend. He even told them not to bring me into it. Too stressful for her recovery, he'd said. I sat in silence as the truth unfolded. They hadn't betrayed me alone. They'd been used. But manipulation doesn't erase betrayal. They still signed. They still lied. Do you know what you signed away? I whispered. Daniel shook his head. He said it was just a deed transfer. I reached into my purse and pulled out the old property file from my husband's desk. This, I said, laying down the original document, is the real deed, the one your father filed years ago. What you signed wasn't a transfer. It was fraud. Their faces went blank. Brian whispered, "Mom, what do we do now?" I looked at both of them, the boys I raised, the men who broke me, and said, quietly, "We don't call the police." "Not yet." They exchanged glances, confused. "Why not?" Daniel asked. "Because," I said, folding the papers carefully, "I want Charles to think he's won." Revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with patience. I stood up, feeling the old strength I thought I'd lost return to my chest. "You two are going to help me get everything back. But first, we're going to let him dig his own grave." That night, a message arrived on my phone. No name, just a photo. It was Uncle Charles standing outside my house, smiling. If you've ever trusted family and paid the price, subscribe. Because this next part, it's where trust turns into justice. For the next few days, I did something I never thought I'd have the strength or the patience to do. I pretended. I smiled at the neighbors. I answered calls from my sons as if everything was fine. And when Uncle Charles stopped by to check how I was settling into my new place, I offered him tea and smiled through my teeth. He sat across from me in my living room, legs crossed, that smug look of self-satisfaction plastered across his face. The same look he had at my husband's funeral when he told everyone, "Family sticks together." Now, I understood what he meant. He was the kind of man who sticks a knife in your back and calls a help. "Margaret," he said casually, glancing around, "I hope you understand why your boys did what they did. Desperate times." I stirred my tea slowly. "I do. They meant well." He smiled, satisfied. "Good. That's all that matters." What he didn't notice was the tiny recording device under the coaster. Every word he spoke was being saved. That night, when he left, I opened my late husband's old filing cabinet, the one Charles didn't know existed. Inside were insurance papers, tax records, and the original blueprints for the house, all signed before our marriage. In the corner of one file, I found something I had forgotten even existed, a notarized amendment granting me full ownership rights, even if the property was ever transferred. That was the first key. But the second came from somewhere I didn't expect, my neighbor, Mrs. Cortez. She told me she'd seen Charles meeting with a man in a dark suit outside the property 2 days before I returned from the hospital. They were arguing, she said, something about the paperwork being rushed. I thanked her, and later that night, I went digging again, this time online. I searched the property database and found the deed transfer. The buyer's name? Clifford Whitmore. Except Clifford didn't exist. The business address was fake. The phone number disconnected. But the notary's name, the one who validated the document, belonged to someone real, a lawyer who had once worked for Charles's company. I had enough to suspect, not enough to strike. So I played along. I started sending polite thank you messages to Charles, pretending to accept the sale. Meanwhile, I met with my husband's old lawyer friend, who quietly began gathering digital copies of every related document. Every time I texted Charles, I could almost hear his ego growing. He thought he'd won, but each word, each visit, each smirk was another thread I was pulling loose. A week later, I invited both my sons to dinner. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply told them, if you want to make this right, you'll follow my lead. Exactly. They agreed, desperate to redeem themselves. That night, Brian looked at me across the table and said, "What are you planning, Mom?" I smiled faintly. "I'm planning to make your uncle confess on his own." Daniel frowned. "And if he doesn't?" I stared out the window at the house lights flickering across the street. "Then," I said softly, "he'll lose something money can't buy." The next morning, a letter was slipped under my door. No return address. Just 5 words written in shaky ink. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." If you've ever been told to stay quiet when you knew the truth, subscribe. Because silence has never saved anyone. The letter on my doorstep didn't scare me. It confirmed I was close. Fear used to paralyze me. Now it sharpened me. That morning, I called Brian and Daniel over. Their guilt still hung heavy, I could see it in the way they couldn't meet my eyes. I told them everything about the fake buyer, the forged documents, and the recording I had of their uncle admitting desperate times. Daniel's voice broke. "Mom," he said, he was helping us save the family. He said the hospital bills were going to bury us. I nodded slowly. "And you believed him because you wanted to believe someone cared." I paused, then added, "Now, we'll make him believe the same thing, so he slips." They didn't understand yet, but they would. That evening, Brian called Charles. Loudspeaker on. He told him, with fake enthusiasm, "Uncle Charles, Mom's talking about selling the other property Dad left. She wants to use your lawyer again." Charles hesitated. "The lawyer? Oh, yes, that's a good idea. Maybe you could stop by this weekend," Brian added, "and help her sign the first papers again. She trusts you." There was a brief pause. Then the trap began to close. "Of course," Charles said. "Tell her I'll be there." For 3 days I prepared. I reprinted fake property forms with invisible ink marks that would fade after being handled for a few minutes. I hid 2 cameras in the living room, one behind the vase Charles gave me years ago, and another inside a clock he'd ironically gifted at my wedding. On the 4th day, he arrived, dressed sharp, cologne heavy, voice syrupy. He walked in with a confident grin. "Margaret, you look radiant. I'm glad we're past all that unpleasantness." I smiled faintly. "You always did know how to make things right, Charles." I offered him tea, the same way I had during his first lie. He took it, chuckled. "Well, I learned from the best." As he started flipping through the documents, pretending to review them, Brian sat on the couch, pretending to scroll through his phone. But I saw him secretly tap record on his voice memo app. That's when Charles slipped. He muttered, "These signatures will need to look like the first ones I forged. Don't worry, it worked before, didn't it?" My heart stopped. He realized his mistake half a second too late. Brian's head snapped up. Daniel stood. I leaned forward and said, quietly, "It's over, Charles." He froze. What do you mean?" I pointed toward the clock. The red light blinked once. I said, "you just confessed on camera." His face drained of color. "Margaret, let's be reasonable. We can fix this." "Fix it." I cut him off. "You stole my home. You tricked my children. You threatened me to stay quiet. You broke this family for your greed." For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Not guilt, not shame. Just fear. He stumbled to the door. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did," I said softly. "The recordings backed up. And tomorrow morning, the lawyer you used will get a copy, along with the local press." He stopped, his voice trembling. "You'll destroy me." I looked at him steadily. "You already did that to yourself." He left without another word. That night, Brian sat beside me, tears in his eyes. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I took his hand. "Don't be. You made a mistake, but now you helped fix it." Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful, the kind of peace that comes before everything changes. The next morning, before I could send the recording to the lawyer, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. A woman's voice said softly, "Mrs. Collins, I think you should know, Charles wasn't working alone." The woman's voice on the phone was calm, too calm. "Mrs. Collins," she repeated. "I'm calling because I worked at the law firm your brother-in-law used." My heart thudded, and she hesitated. "Charles didn't act alone. Someone close to you gave him your personal details, your ID copies, your old will, even your hospital schedule. Without that, the sale couldn't have gone through." I gripped the phone tighter. "Who was it?" She paused again, then said quietly, "Check your email. I've sent you the documents." The line went dead. I opened the email seconds later. The sender's name, k.lawson@farringtonlegal.com. Attached were scanned copies of the sale agreement, an internal memo, and a familiar signature on the verification of identity line. It was Evelyn, my best friend, the woman who had visited me at the hospital every day, the one who told me to trust Charles, his family. For a moment, the world went silent. Even my breath refused to move. Then came the slow burn of realization. Evelyn wasn't just helping him. She had guided him. She was the reason he knew I was sedated during my surgery, the reason he had the spare keys to the house, the reason my sons thought everything was legitimate. That evening, I sat in the dark living room, watching old videos of Evelyn and me from years ago. Birthday parties, laughter, promises that now felt poisonous. In one clip, she leaned into the camera, smiling. "Best friends don't keep secrets," she said. I whispered back to the screen, "You kept the worst one." The next morning I called her. "Evelyn, it's me. Can we talk? I'd like to meet at the house." She agreed without hesitation. That was her mistake. When she arrived, she brought flowers. How poetic. "Oh, Maggie," she began, "I've missed you. You've been so distant after everything." I smiled faintly. "I just needed time to think. Sit, please." As she sat, I slid a document across the table, the memo with her signature. Her face changed instantly. Her eyes darted up. "What's this supposed to be?" she asked too quickly. "It's your handwriting, isn't it?" I asked softly. "Maggie, I can explain." "Don't," I said. "Just tell me why." She swallowed hard. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. Charles said it was temporary. He promised we'd give it back after the property transfer cleared. I just needed the money. My daughter's school fees." Her voice cracked, but mine didn't. "I trusted you," I said. "Through my husband's death. Through everything. And you sold me for tuition money." Tears rolled down her face. "Please, Maggie, I made a mistake." I leaned forward. "So did I." She frowned. "What do you mean?" I pressed a button on my phone. A soft click echoed through the room. The same recorder I had used on Charles was running again. Her eyes widened. You're recording this?" "Yes," I said, calm as ice. "And just like Charles, you've given me all I need." She stood, trembling. "You can't." "I can," I cut her off. "You betrayed me for money. Now you'll pay in truth." She turned and fled the room. But I didn't chase her. I didn't have to. Her confession would do the running for me. That night, I sat by the window, watching the rain smear the glass. Charles and Evelyn, both people I'd trusted most, had carved out the pieces of my life for profit. But the part that hurt most wasn't losing the house. It was realizing how easily love turns to strategy in the wrong hands. Just as I began to upload the recordings to my lawyer's folder, I noticed something strange. 2 of the files, the ones containing Charles's confession, were missing. A new email appeared in my inbox. No sender name, no subject line, just 5 chilling words. "You're not done yet, Margaret. If you've ever thought the truth would set you free, only to find it trapped you deeper, subscribe." Because in betrayal stories like this, justice always demands a second act. I didn't sleep that night. The rain kept whispering against the window, a soft, cruel reminder that even silence has a way of mocking you when you've been betrayed. The email kept replaying in my mind. "You're not done yet, Margaret." At first, I thought it was Charles trying to scare me into silence. But the missing recordings told me this wasn't just intimidation. It was control. Someone had accessed my files. Someone close. By morning, I drove to the small tech shop where my eldest son, Caleb, worked part-time. He looked up from his counter, startled to see me. "Mom, you're supposed to be resting." "I need you to check something," I said, sliding my phone and laptop across the counter. "Someone's been inside my files." He frowned, opening the laptop. A few minutes later, he froze. "Mom, these weren't deleted. They were transferred to an external drive. From my login credentials." My heart sank. "Your login?" "Yeah," he said quietly. But I swear I didn't wait. He scrolled through the activity log. This happened at 3 a.m. 2 nights ago. I was at home. Who had your password? I asked. He hesitated. Only Uncle Charles. When he said he needed to review something for you. There it was, the second knife. Charles wasn't just fighting to keep the house. He was making sure I had no proof left. But the question remained, how did he know I had recordings at all? That afternoon, another message appeared. Let's meet where it all began. 6 p.m. Don't bring the police. Or your sons. See, I didn't respond. But I knew exactly what where it all began meant. The old family house. The one I built brick by brick after my husband died. The house stood quiet when I arrived. Almost too quiet. Charles was waiting near the porch, his shirt damp from the drizzle, a flash drive in his hand. You've made a mess of things, Margaret, he said flatly. You stole from me, I replied. You forged my signature, manipulated my children, and sold my home while I was unconscious. So yes, I made a mess cleaning yours. He laughed. You always thought you were smarter. But you see this. He held up the flash drive. It's got everything. Every recording. Every conversation. Including yours with Evelyn. You think the law will side with a woman who blackmailed her own family. My pulse quickened. You're bluffing. Am I? He smirked. You record people without consent. That's a crime. I could make sure you never see a courtroom again, except from behind a glass wall. I took a step forward. What do you want, Charles? I want peace, he said. You sign a waiver saying you approved the sale. I walk away. You keep a share of the profit. No police. No scandal. For a moment, I let him believe I was considering it. Then I smiled, the same soft, calm smile I used to use on my sons when they lied about broken glass. I'll think about it, I said. He leaned in. Do that quickly. You have until tomorrow. He turned to leave, but I stopped him. Charles. He looked back. I hope you backed up that flash drive, I said. Because the copy I sent my lawyer, well, that's already scheduled to upload if I don't check in by morning. The flicker of panic in his eyes told me everything. He hadn't expected that. Always 2 steps ahead, I said softly. Just like you taught me. He said nothing, just clenched his jaw and walked off into the rain. That night, my hand shook as I checked my phone. Another email arrived. No name, no subject, just a photo attachment, a screenshot of Caleb's face. He looked frightened. Below it, 5 new words. You're not done yet, Margaret. This wasn't just about property anymore. This was war. Margaret realized the game had shifted from deceit to danger. Her next move wouldn't just decide justice, it would decide survival. When betrayal crosses from lies to threats, would you fight back or give in? Subscribe if you'd stand your ground when the people you love turn into your enemies. By morning, I wasn't thinking like a mother anymore. I was thinking like a strategist. Everything Charles had done, the forged sale, the blackmail, the stolen recordings, pointed to one thing: control. So to defeat him, I had to make him think he still had it. That meant turning the very people he used, my sons, into my greatest weapons. Caleb and Ryan sat across the kitchen table, both pale and tense. I know everything now, I said quietly. Charles forged the deed, and you too were manipulated. But we're not going to the police yet. Ryan frowned. Why not? He's dangerous, Mom. Because, I said, leaning in, if we move too soon, he'll bury every trace of evidence. And worse, he'll come after you both. Caleb's eyes darted to his brother. So, what do we do? I slid 2 envelopes across the table. You're going to make him believe I've given up. You'll tell him I agreed to sign the waiver. Make it convincing. Ryan looked uneasy. And the catch? I smiled faintly. The waiver he'll get isn't the one he thinks it is. Inside the envelope was a fake consent form, crafted by my lawyer friend to appear like a property approval, but actually function as a confession acknowledgement. Once signed, It would confirm that the sale was unauthorized and forced under deception. All I needed was for Charles to touch pen to paper. 2 days later, Ryan met Charles at a quiet cafe. He wore a small recording device in his jacket, disguised as a button. I waited in my car across the street, watching through the rain-specked windshield. Charles looked calm. Too calm. He smiled at Ryan like a man greeting a pawn he'd already sacrificed. "So, your mother finally came to her senses?" Charles asked. Ryan nodded, pushing the document forward. "She said it's best to end it peacefully. No court, no lawyers." Charles's eyes narrowed. Smart woman. Shame she didn't realize that earlier. He signed without hesitation. When Ryan came back to the car, his hands trembled. He did it. He signed. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Good. Now we wait. That evening, Charles called me. "I got the papers," he said. "You did the right thing, Margaret." "I just want this nightmare to be over," I replied, keeping my voice small. He chuckled. "It already is." But what he didn't know was that the moment his signature dried, a digital copy of the confession had been sent automatically to my lawyer's secure drive and to a journalist contact my late husband once trusted. The story was set to release in 48 hours unless I manually stopped it. I wasn't seeking fame. I was seeking justice and maybe a little revenge. Later that night, I heard a noise near the garage. When I opened the door, a small envelope lay on the floor. No stamp, no handwriting. Inside was a single flash drive labeled "For You." I hesitated, then plugged it into the laptop. It contained one video, my husband speaking directly to the camera. It was dated 3 months before he died. "If you're watching this, Margaret, then Charles has finally done what I feared." I left instructions with my attorney. Don't trust anyone until you've seen the documents, especially him. My breath caught. My husband had known. He'd left clues, buried proof of Charles's greed long before I fell sick. The flash drive wasn't from Charles. It was from someone else, someone who wanted me to know the full picture. At the end of the video, my husband said something I'll never forget. "If he ever tries to take what's yours, remind him whose name built it." The next morning, Charles called again, this time furious. "What did you do, Margaret?" he barked. "Do you realize what you've sent me?" "I sent nothing," I said calmly. "Maybe your conscience finally did." He cursed under his breath. "You think this is over? That document you made me sign, it won't hold up." "Maybe not in your court," I said. "But it already has in the one that matters, the court of truth." There was a long pause, then a quiet click. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. He thought he'd played me, but the truth was I'd turned his entire game against him. Every lie, every manipulation, every signature. Only one thing remained, to reveal the final secret that had been hidden since my husband's death and bring every piece crashing down. As the morning sun touched the broken porch, Margaret realized there was still one player she hadn't confronted, someone who knew her husband's secret before anyone else. And they were still watching her. Would you forgive the people who destroyed your trust, or make them feel every ounce of the pain they caused? Subscribe if you believe betrayal deserves more than silence. The night after Charles's furious call, I couldn't sleep. The flash drive with my husband's message replayed in my head over and over. If he ever tries to take what's yours, remind him whose name built it. But what name? What had my husband left unsaid? I went into his old study, a room I hadn't entered in months. The faint smell of cedar and dust greeted me like an old memory that refused to fade. Every drawer I opened felt like turning a page of a story I thought I already knew, until I found the blue folder. It was tucked behind a row of old accounting books, sealed with my husband's signature and a single line written in his handwriting. For Margaret, if Charles ever returns. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were property records, bank transfers, and an unfiled will draft. one that showed the house wasn't just in my husband's name. It was in mine, tied to a trust fund I never knew existed. But that wasn't all. There was also a handwritten letter. Charles knows more than he lets on. He was in debt, Margaret gambling, bad loans. He borrowed against the company name, forged documents under mine. If anything happens to me, follow the trail from Weston Holdings. That's where he buried the lies. I froze. Weston Holdings was my husband's old real estate firm, now owned by none other than Charles's son, Gregory. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a legacy of deceit running through the family's bloodline. The next morning, I drove downtown, straight to the building I once helped design. Gregory's office door was open, his back turned. When he saw me, his expression shifted from polite confusion to unease. "Aunt Margaret, this is unexpected." "Not as unexpected as what your father's done," I said, sliding the blue folder across his desk. "He didn't touch it. Whatever Charles told you." I cut him off. "I'm not here for his stories. I'm here for the truth. My husband warned me years ago." He mentioned Weston Holdings. Gregory's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have come here." His tone wasn't threatening, it was pleading. "You don't understand. My father isn't the only one who wanted that property. There are investors, people you can't go against." I leaned closer. "Then tell them to pray I don't start talking." He sighed, defeated. "There's a recording. Your husband made it before he died. It proves everything. But if you release it, you'll destroy more than Charles. You'll destroy your sons, too." I drove home in silence, the words echoing in my head. Destroy my sons? How? When I got back, Ryan was sitting at the kitchen counter, pale, restless. "Mom," he said quietly, "there's something I didn't tell you." He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was an old voice memo, dated 2 years ago. It was my husband's voice again, faint but clear. "If you're hearing this, then Charles has already made his move. But I can't protect both the company and the boys. I gave him part ownership of the firm under their names to secure their future. If this all collapses, they'll go down with him." I felt the air leave my chest. My husband had tied our sons' names to Charles's company, unknowingly making them accomplices in the fraud that followed. So this was the hidden truth. If I went through with exposing Charles, my sons would be indicted with him. Justice had turned into a trap, and revenge suddenly felt like a noose tightening around all of us. That night, I sat by the window, the house glowing faintly in the streetlight. The home I had nearly lost was safe, but my sons' futures hung in balance. I opened my laptop, hesitated over the email draft that would send the story to the journalist. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Could I press send and lose my children? Or stay silent and let Charles walk free again? Somewhere between love and vengeance, I realized justice wasn't clean, it never had been. Revenge could give me peace, but at what cost? The next morning, a single message appeared in my inbox from an unknown sender. Subject: "You don't have to choose, he already did." Attached was a video file labeled "The Last Confession." As she clicked play, the video began with Charles's face, bruised, defeated, and whispering into the camera. "You were never supposed to find out, Margaret. He made me do it." The question now was, who was he? Would you still seek revenge if the truth threatened to destroy your family too? Subscribe if you believe some betrayals go deeper than blood. The video played in slow horror. Charles sitting in what looked like his office, face swollen, voice shaking. "You were never supposed to find out, Margaret. He made me do it. Your husband, David." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My husband? The man who left me everything? The one who warned me about Charles? Charles continued, voice breaking. David owed people money. Bad people. He used the house as collateral through Weston Holdings. When he died, the paperwork disappeared and I took the blame. But the truth, the real truth, is that we both forged signatures. He wanted to protect you, but he left me to clean up his mess. I paused the video. My pulse pounded in my ears. Was this another lie? Or had my late husband betrayed me from the grave? The next day I called Charles. My voice was steady, too steady. "We need to talk," I said. "Come to the house. Tonight." He arrived after sunset, the same car that once carried forged deeds and stolen papers pulling into my driveway. He looked older, exhausted, carrying the weight of too many secrets. "You've seen it," he said before I could speak. I did. I motioned to the dining table, but I also know he left me the trust documents. He protected me. "So tell me, Charles, what's the truth?" He laughed bitterly. "The truth? David didn't just protect you, Margaret. He used you. That trust fund? It wasn't a gift. It was a hiding place. The money came from investors he never repaid." My chest tightened. "You're lying." He shook his head. "No. I wish I was. When he died, I tried to fix it before it reached your sons. But when you wouldn't sell the house, I did what I had to do." I looked at him for a long time. There was no hatred left, only clarity. "So this was never just about greed," I said softly. "It was about survival." He nodded. "For both of us." I slid a folder across the table. "The real deed, my trump card. Then you'll survive without this." He opened it, eyes widening. "You didn't." "I did. The trust is in my name alone. The company debt ends with you. The press gets the full story at midnight unless I get a signed confession tonight." Charles's hands trembled. "You'll ruin me." I met his eyes. "No, Charles. You ruined yourself the moment you made my sons lie for you." He stared at me, then picked up the pen. The sound of ink on paper felt like the closing of a grave. Hours later, when the police took him away, I stood at the doorway watching the flashing lights fade into the distance. The house was silent again. The same house they tried to take, now mine once more. But the victory felt hollow, because even as justice came, the truth had torn something inside me apart. David wasn't the man I thought. My sons weren't innocent. And I wasn't the same woman who entered that hospital months ago. I walked to the living room and sat where the sunlight hit the old photo frames. Our family smiling, frozen in time before the lies. Tears finally came. I whispered to no one. Revenge gives you closure, but never peace. The front door creaked. It was Brian. He stood silently, eyes red. "Mom," he said quietly, "are we okay?" I smiled faintly. "We will be, but we'll never be the same." Weeks later, the news broke. Charles Weston confesses to multi-million fraud scheme. Family property recovered. People called me brave. Some called me ruthless. But only I knew the truth. I didn't win. I simply stopped losing. The house stood, empty of lies but heavy with ghosts. And sometimes when the wind creaks through the old wooden beams, I swear I hear David's voice whisper, not in guilt, but in warning. "You've found the truth, Margaret. Now live with it." Betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you love. But revenge doesn't heal the wound. It only teaches you how sharp it truly was. If you've ever been torn between forgiveness and revenge, subscribe, because some stories don't end, they echo.